Good evening. All right, I'm just going to, first thing, you're thinking, what's he doing up there? Kirk's sitting over there. Well, that's a good question. And since I'm telling the story, I'm going to tell my version of it. When Kirk gives us the dates at the beginning of the year when he's going to be gone for his various meetings, he understood he would not be here tonight. He starts a gospel meeting at Highland Acres this week, and he understood that he wouldn't be here tonight, so I scheduled somebody to speak tonight. Just a few weeks ago, he remembered that Highland Acres does what we usually do. They have their evening service in the afternoon. So he asked me what to do, and I said, hey, listen, I wanted to hear me say something before this year's over, so here I am. He forgot. See, that's my version of the story. The first scripture we want to look at tonight is Psalms 23. When Brett asked me this evening what the title of my lesson was, I had to think for a few seconds. I hope that's not a bad sign. I believe that, and maybe it's the generation my generation, but I believe that a little cynicism is healthy. But lately, I feel that my cynicism has been not too healthy. Yet, we still must be ever vigilant against the work of Satan. We must still be ever diligent in our obedience to follow Jesus Christ. We must still be earnest in our ministry to one another, and we must endure as we carry the burdens and the cares of our lives. No matter how we must feel, how we will feel about it, no matter how we react to what is going on all around us and dealing with all of these things, we still must be faithful. So we must not lose sight of our hope. The stresses and the concerns of our faithfulness and of the carrying of our own burdens can consume us, can consume the day, and push aside this hope that we know that we have. This hope of God that's in Jesus. So what I want to do tonight is simply remind us of that hope. I don't need to preach to you about it. You know all about it. You believe it. You live it. So tonight I just simply want to remind us of it. It took a while, but when it was time, God said, Moses, go to Pharaoh and tell him, let my people go. And it has taken quite a while already. But when it is time, God will turn to his son and he will say, Jesus, it's time. Go and bring my people home. You see, to me, that's what our hope is. That one day God's going to say, son, go and get them. I want them home now. But it's between those 2 points, between those 2 acts of God, when he let us go to come to earth and be born, and that time when he's going to call us back home. It is between those 2 points that we must follow Jesus through the wilderness of this world as we attempt to live this life that he's given us. We must live each day as a precious gift from God. In the 23rd Psalm, and the 23rd Psalm is used often in funerals, but the 23rd Psalm is not about death. It's about the hope that we live with in this life. Funeral's a good time for this to be read. but maybe we need to think about it every day of our life. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me for the presence of mine enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely, David said, goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and then I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The psalm was about going home when this life's done. It's about our hope. It's a promise, as much of the Psalms are, because David had a unique relationship with God. He knew God's heart, and God had his heart in his hands because David gave it to him without reservation. The 23rd Psalm was a promise of God's faithfulness, that God will do what he said he's going to do. That when it's ready, when he's ready, his people will go home and the journey will be done. So we live each precious day by freely giving of our brotherly love, which is often mentioned in the Psalms. Openly trusting our good shepherd in his watchful care. Stand in the courage that we take from his strength and from his power. And to hold on to the hope that God is not done yet. Because you see, here's what this all means to me. Here's what the resurrection means. That when you die, when I die, we're not done. Because God is not done. That day that you and I die, we are not done because God will have one more promise yet to keep. The promise of bringing us home. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, beginning in verse 13. Paul, in a very simplistic but very powerful way, describes that going home. And he's writing to a congregation that has been troubled and suffering for their faith, struggling with this life to be faithful, struggling with the opposition of their neighbors to be faithful, struggling to hold on to each other. And Paul says, but we do not want you to be misinformed, brothers, about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so, through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. For this we declare to you by the word from the Lord, that we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself would descend from heaven with a cry command, with the voice of an archangel, and with the sound of the trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first. Then those who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them into the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. This isn't home. It's meeting us in the air. He's not setting foot on this place again, because he's got one more promise yet to keep. And we will meet him in the air so that we will always be with the Lord. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. I don't know how many you have as well as I have. We've tried to console or wanted to console someone who did not have this hope when they were facing death. What can you say? I have learned more and have gained more faith and more strength from God's children that have allowed me to share their death with them than I have from anyone living, because they understood they were going home. When it was time for the doctors to tell us what our options were, to tell Dad what his options were, he called the family together, and we all sat with Dad and Mom, and Dr. Beeson shared with us what he could do and what we could choose. Well, we knew what we could choose. We knew the choices we didn't, but he shared with us what he could do. And he was very honest. He said, I cannot guarantee anything, because the tumor was inside the brain, not on the surface of it. And Dr. Beeson said, I've got a tremendous technology. I can go in and I can zero in and I can zap that tumor. But just a breath of a mistake, and your life is ruined. Dad was 81 years old. Dad already knew where he was going when he was done. He told us, he said, I've lived a full life. I know where I'm going. And there's no point in staying. Because you see, sometimes the risk of no quality of life at all, why would you choose that over being with God? When I was 40 years old, I didn't understand that. I've heard that before. I'd heard that before, but I didn't understand it. But finally, when I sat there with Dad, I understood. And I don't know that, but that's the way I feel now. Heaven is so much better. Because you see, this is not home. God has given every day, God gives us the precious gift of life. Live it. The scriptures teach us don't waste it on the trivial things. Devote it to God, devote it to each other. People are what matter most. Ted Kell used to say, one of my teachers at Sunset, Ted had a child that was born paraplegic, and it was the doctor's fault. And we asked Ted about that. He said, well, justice is in God's hands. He said God had a purpose for Mark, and we're going to let Mark live that purpose and serve the Lord. But Ted used to say, if I preach to 1 million people and baptize 1,000 souls in my lifetime, but I lose my 2 children from the Lord, he said, I failed. And his point was this: know what's important in life and use each precious day to seek that purpose, to seek those things that matter the most. It's us. It's people. Now, I'm good at the job that I do, and I like the job that I do, although I'm reaching the point where I don't want to do it no more. But But that has nothing to do with the job. It has to do with everything else, as you all understand. It has to do with the circumstances I have to work under. But at the same time, there's some things I can do for the Lord if I didn't have to work for somebody else. So I realize today that comes. The Lord let me live long enough. But nothing in my entire life, I've lived by this, that nothing has been more important to me than people. Not what I did, but the people that I served. Christy took a sociology class about family when she was in college. And it was in the lecture hall because it was one of these large classes. We think classes are large in public school. 100. If you've been in college, you know what those lecture halls are like. Class of 150 people. All you're doing is sitting there hearing a man talk at you, or a woman talk at you. He asked a question. How many of you still eat supper with your family, as a family? And out of all those, and I don't know if there's 150, but it was a lecture hall, and she said it was full. Christy was the only one who raised her hand. And he said, there you have it. I tried my best every night to be home when Christy went to bed. I can't do it all the time. Life doesn't allow us to do things in a perfect way. But from that to that night in the hospital with Dad, I finally realized what really matters most. Because God's got one more promise to keep for me. One more promise. He's already saved my soul. He's already saved yours. He's got one more promise to keep for you. Don't throw that promise away. Don't throw that promise away by turning away from the one who's going to keep that promise. Stop choosing the way of the world. Stop choosing the way of sin. Choose the way of Jesus Christ, because he has one mission. He's always had one mission: to bring God's people home. The cross that he died on is what makes that possible. His resurrection will be our resurrection, and that's when he'll fulfill that final promise. But life is hard sometimes. I'm watching Norman struggling with severe pain as I watched Dad, and I could not stand it. I'm so helpless. Twice I heard Norman. Of course, I realized that the laudanum was making him hallucinate. But it was because of the pain that he said this. Twice he told the Lord to bring the light. And we knew what he meant. Because he was hurting so much, he couldn't stand it. This is a man who didn't need to have anybody all of his life do anything for him. He grew up on a farm. He worked with his hands all his life. Took care of his family with his own hands. Nobody else is his own. Anything he needed to do, he could do it. Still, even though he's blind, you can put a screw in his hand, and in 3 seconds, he can tell you just by feeling it exactly everything you need to know about that screw, and then some. He was good at what he did. And he feels so helpless. But he knows where home is. He wasn't afraid of that light that he thought he saw, because he knows where home is. And then when he was lucid, and he could face his pain on his own strength, which really wasn't much strength, because he just so weak. He told me yesterday, he said, Mike, I love the Lord, and he loves me. And I said, I know that, Norman. He's brought you through so much for the last 26 years. He has a purpose for you to be here, even though you're suffering. He said, I know what that purpose is. And he named his 3 children. People, always what matters most in your relationship with God. Use each precious day for that purpose, so that when the Lord returns, you will go home with him. He won't miss you because you followed him now. As we sing the invitation song, I encourage you to remember this one last promise that God has to keep. Never allow Satan to turn you. We're going to fall, we're going to make mistakes, we're going to sin. That's not the question. Don't let Satan cause you to throw that hope away. It's the only thing that you have. You're going home. If you need to respond to the invitation, you may while we stand and sing.